Saluton, bonjour, and namaste. Welcome to the first talk in the Full More Talk series. The title of this talk is The Holocaust and the Hindua-Genocidaro. The word, the Hindua-Genocidaro, is a word from Esperanto, and I'll explain what it means, and that will maybe introduce us to the horror of what really happened in South Asia. So, the subtitle of this talk is A Series of Unfortunate Events, the Hindu Genocides. I've created this talk for Monsieur Francois Gauthier, the company, and I will be giving this talk in English, and I'm sort of bilingual, and I'll be bilingual in English and French. And I also discuss Sansperanto, a new constructed language that I have architected. And the purpose of Sansperanto, company, you understand, it is to help us remember la histoire, the history truthfully. That is the purpose of this language, and you'll see why such a new language is needed. So let's look at why the Holocaust still matters. So now, why am I introducing the term? Why am I bringing in the Holocaust perpetrated on the Jews? Because Mr. Gauthier has used the term the Hindu Holocaust for what happened to the Hindus, and it is his right to use that term. I think to argue whether or not that term itself is appropriate or not is just, company. It is just, you understand, it's just linguistic hair pulling. Really, if you will see the statistics that have been compiled on this, you will see it for what it is, a genocidaro. So what does the term genocidaro mean? Genocido in Esperanto means genocide. Genocidaro means a series of genocides, and that tells you a little bit about the horror of what was visited upon the Hindus. So why does the Holocaust still matter? The Holocaust, so this slide, some of these slides I took by screenshotting a talk from Prager University. And according to that talk, the Holocaust was the greatest evil ever carried out by any government in history. So I'm trying to critique that talk. And so as part of that, it's fair use to take some slides from there. And so anytime someone calls something like the Holocaust the greatest evil, that becomes problematic because फिर लोग सोचेंगे, that is, sorry to segue into Hindi, then people will think, company where you understand, pourquoi nous avons so why do we have a term like the greatest evil applied to an incident like this? And so it was quite natural then to see commenters on the internet under that very video questioning the way this video was delivered and the way the subject matter was discussed. Pourquoi? Why? Because calling the Holocaust the greatest evil is problematic because there have been genocides perpetrated upon other populations as well. Now, I'll give this talk in two parts. In the first part, I'll discuss the Holocaust perpetrated on the Jews, and then I'll come to the topic of La Hindua-Genocidaro. And the term genocidaro is just absolutely appropriate, and you'll see why. So the slides from this talk, so they were just screenshotted from a talk on Prager University's website. It is by Emily Austin, and you can go to this URL to see that talk and gain more knowledge about the Holocaust, right? So why does the Holocaust still matter? It was the greatest state-led evil in modern history, according to Prager University. So when someone uses this type of language, it is very natural for other people to call it into question. But if this is your standard, the mass killings of a large number of people, then what do you call something that was a series of genocides perpetrated, a genocidaro? And that tells you a little bit about the horror of what happened. And the very fact that historians don't want to use these types of terms tells you something about the unique environment of political correctness that we see in India, where certain things are somehow off limits, which I never see happen in America. In America, we've always believed that everything should be discussed and truth should ultimately come out. And the fact that a term such as genocidaro is not being used is certainly a matter of a concern. even the term Holocaust has been considered controversial. Why is that? Because nobody can really deny some of the bare facts around what happened in South Asia. So as the people on the as the people good people at Prague University want to tell us, many under 40 still don't know very little about the Holocaust. That may well be true, and I believe it is true. So so we have the situation where people don't know much about it. So it is reasonable, therefore, to inform people more about the Holocaust. And understanding it is, of course, vital for humanity. And why? Because it involved the mass murder of a whole uh, race of people. So let's look at some of the basic facts. It happened, between 1939 and 1945, and that's the period of history that's marked on this chart. It took place in Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler. So the leader of Nazi Germany was Adolf Hitler, and what was the goal? It was to eliminate every Jewish person in Europe and beyond. And Hitler, he saw every Jew as an enemy, adults and children, and there were no distinction made among the Jews. All were targeted for death. But now, if you try to parallel it with what happened in India, it's true that many of the invaders of India also saw every Hindu as an enemy, adults included. And no distinction was made among different types of Hindus. So there is a reasonable parallel that can be drawn. And it is reasonable for people to say that although they are two different communities and two different ethnic groups, really, company will understand who. The word, the phrase "comprenez-vous" in French just means you understand. So it is reasonable to compare the two, because just like Hitler saw every Jew as an enemy, even every Hindu was seen as an enemy. And so it's only when we start using terms such as La Hindua-Genocidaro that I think Hindus themselves will begin to appreciate what was perpetrated on them. So this is Hitler, right? And you can see the swastika on his sleeve. So let us understand the Holocaust a little bit more. The initial killings were by firing squads, and later gas chambers were installed in the death camps. And then gas would be piped in, and people would die. And then, these people who died, they were Jews. And then their bodies were looted. And this was for getting gold teeth out, because those had value in the market. And rings were pulled out, and because those were often made of gold, and that had value. And even hair was chopped off. And company with you understand les hommes so the people who were made to do this were actually other Jewish people themselves, and they took the hair and used it to stuff mattresses, for instance. It's quite horrible. So why did the Nazis target the Jews? Because it was not just racism, it was also a deeper hatred of Jewish influence. And they blamed the Jews for not only communism, but even capitalism. Right? And they saw Jews as a threat to this concept they had developed called the Aryan dominance. Company. So yeah, I have also prepared a Hindi version of this, and I'm discussing this sort of to provide more information for people from India. Company, you understand? And the Hindi talk is also going to be uploaded to YouTube, and it is also of a similar nature. So there's more of an informational video where we're trying to convey more about the Holocaust to people in India, but it is of general interest to people around the world. So, so the Nazis, they targeted Jews all over Europe. I mean, the places where the Jews were spared was Britain, the island of the main island of Great Britain, as well as Ireland, because that was under the British, right? Under nominally the British Empire, right? So, I say nominally because the Britain already had a parliament by that time, and so it was really a democracy, but a constitutional monarchy, really. So, that is so we have all these different disagreements about, say, the role of Britain in their empire. Some historians have even argued that they were a force for good, like Niall Ferguson, and with whom I disagree heavily. I have a lot of disagreements with Niall Ferguson on that characterization. But nobody can deny that just as Hitler perpetrated genocides on the Jews, a series of genocides were perpetrated on the Hindus that lasted centuries, not just years, but centuries. And I'll come to that in the second part of my talk. But what I want to do next is talk about the religious and ideological context. So Hitler despised Christianity. He called it a Jewish creation, and he wanted, according to Prague University, to return Germany to pre-Christian paganism. That's, you know, although it's doubtful that he could have succeeded, he probably would have been aware of that. There were far too many Christians for that to happen. And, still, most German Christians did support Hitler, and but that was part of what he was trying to do. He wanted to return Germany to pre-Christian paganism. So that is some of the general context about the Holocaust. And Hitler, as you might know, he even prioritized killing Jews over winning the war, company war. So he, was much more interested in the killing of the Jews than anything else. And he just considered the Jews as the enemy. And to really understand the nature of the horror, we must keep in mind that the number 6 million is so large that it becomes an abstraction. We must remember that the individual sufferings also that were perpetrated, and victims were tortured, humiliated, and even stripped before death, and medical experiments were conducted without anesthesia. This is what is one of the Prague University's renditions of the gas chambers. And if you look at the pipes up top, that is where the gas used to come in, and that's how the Jews were put to death. So the lesson: Hitler may be seen as one of history's greatest evils, his worst act, the Holocaust. And I would again insist that we must never forget or become indifferent to what happened to the Jews. So with that, I come to the end of part one. I'll come back for part two, the conclusion of I want to come back to it as come back to the Hindu Holocaust as part of part two, and I will do so after the break. Merci beaucoup. Thanks for listening, and see you again later.